Hi everybody, John here from All Miniatures Great and Small, and today we're going to be talking Flames of War. We're going to be talking about how to create a table for your battles of Flames of War. I've had a lot of people ask me about our table and what we've done, so I thought I would take some time to build a table and kind of show you how we go through the process. Now, every gaming group's going to have a different process for terrain. Some people like lots of terrain, some people like little terrain. Ultimately that's up to you, but in a game like Flames of War, terrain has a big impact on the outcome of the game. So you want to make sure that you set up your board in a way that's going to be fair to both players but is also interesting. So in this video we're going to go through the entire setup with my collection so you can see how to create a Flames of War board. Okay, I've broken the camera free. The first thing we're going to talk about is the underboard, what's underneath the board. Now games like Flames of War, also 40K, typically want a 4x6 playfield. That's kind of the recommended dimension, is 4x6. So I've actually created these boards. I just built them out of scrap I had in my garage from a few projects, and I've used them for years and years. Basically they are 2x4 sections of board. I built 3 of them, and I just framed them in very easily, and I'm not a carpenter by any stretch of the imagination, so they're pretty sad, but they do what we need them to do. And then on these particular ones I just had some Velcro on I guess over there on that end to keep them together. We've also done clamps underneath to keep these together. But basically the idea is you have boards, you have purpose-built tables. We've used those white 6x3 tables from that you can buy at like Walmart or Target. Put 2 of those together and it gives you space for stuff on the side. This is an office table that's kind of a weird shape, so we can't just play right on it. We need a table on top. So you got to make sure that you have a table, and you have to have a secure table. You also want to make sure that the table, you know, if you're pressing down, you're not going to flip the board up and over into someone's face or your own face and ruin your game. That could be pretty bad. So there you go. That is a look at the underboard. All right, next up, now that we've taken care of the underboard, we're ready to put a mat on it. There's lots of different ways to play with different kinds of mats. You could have cloth, you could spray paint this green if you wanted to and just play straight on here. Depending on what you want to do, how much money and time you want to commit to it, you have different options. Now what I'm going to use is a battle mat. This one is from Table War, called Grassy Plains. These are great. They're mouse pad material, so it's a giant 6-foot by 4-foot mouse pad basically. They do have their limitations. They are flat. You are playing on a 2-dimensional board when you roll this out. The other option, or taking it further, is building custom tiles or boards. You know, having sculpted mountains out of styrofoam, for example. And we've all done that or built that if you've played gaming for any length of time like I have. But this is a great solution. For a long time they also had like grass mats, but they were very monotone. It was just grass, just green. But these come in different designs and give you some texture before you even build up your mat. There's a lot of versions of this, and this is really the first step, choosing your game mat as far as what type of battle you're going to play. If you're fighting the Battle of the Bulge, you're not going to want a vibrant green gaming mat. If you're playing Normandy, well, that's when you want your green. If you are playing Flames of War, you don't want a gothic themed map where things might be out of scale or there's skulls on the field. That doesn't work for Flames of War, but it's totally fine in your games of 40K. So you want to make sure you have an appropriate mat for the type of battle you want. So the battle that I'm going to set up for and show you guys, we're just going to do a generic European grassy field. So it could be anywhere in Europe or Italy, somewhere nice and green. Okay, so now with our mat in place, we're going to talk about putting terrain on top of it. So that's going to be the next step. So I've got terrain in front of me. This is just my normal collection. If I was just building a standard table, nothing special. I would use this stuff you see here. Now this is a mix of stuff. So a lot of the stuff I have is from Battlefront's Gale Force 9 terrain range. They make some great themed terrain that makes building a World War II battlefield real easy. But you can always spice those up as well. But I've got other things here that aren't from Battlefront or Gale Force 9. So let's talk about what we've got. So over here we have hedges. Now a lot of people have asked me these hedges. I've built a lot of these hedges for making a bocage or Normandy table, but they're good for bocage or just regular old hedges. And this is entirely handmade with molding, clump foliage from Woodland Scenics, toothpicks, and lots and lots of glue. But they, you know, these are probably 7 or 8 years old, could use a little cleanup, but they are really nice. So I've got a bunch of those. The nice thing about having terrain like this is this could be line of sight blocking terrain. So you can't necessarily shoot across it unless you're going through a gate or something like that. Next up I have these roads or paths that I made. These were just using like a shop cloth and using caulking, painted and put some flock on, and again I've had these for a long time and they've served me really well. This is some Battlefront road if you're playing Team Yankee, which all of the same rules I'm talking about here for Flames of War apply for Team Yankee. One of the ways to differentiate your Team Yankee table from your Flames of War table is to have modern roads on the table. So I'm not going to use these today, but I wanted to show you. All right, so next up we have cobblestone and dirt roads. So these are what we typically use building our Flames of War table. These are both, again, Gale Force 9 terrain. This is kind of cool stuff. It's flexible. When it gets cold, it gets a little bit stiffer, but it you lay it out and it's really nice. Now I've done a little extra to this. When you buy it out of the box, it's just this plain brown with a dry brush on it, which is totally fine. But you can spruce things up very easily, and it's not hard at all by just adding a little flocking to the edges and to the middle of the road. And you can see what a big difference that makes, even when it's on the table like that. And it just makes it match in. Of course, it makes it match into a green table, but then I'm kind of sacrificing. It's not going to match in quite as well if I'm putting this on a desert table. So that's always the sacrifice, whereas this would work either way, desert, green, you know, war-torn Europe. So there you go. So we've got those roads. We're going to talk a little bit more about roads too, because they're very important to Flames of War and how things move, particularly vehicles. All right, next up we have, these are basically just fields. These are like plowed fields. Again, these are Gale Force 9, so they're this flexible material. You can see the ones that are stock out of the box, and then ones that we've added a little green to the edges here. Either way, it's a great way to put it out, give you some varied terrain. Next up we have some homemade brick walls, and these people always ask me about them, and they're super easy to make. This is really just a popsicle stick and a bead of hot glue, and I think it was like kitty litter or something like that, and then a second bead of hot glue, more kitty litter, and a third bead. You just keep adding beads of hot glue and rocks until you get the height you're looking for. So I just built those, and those are pretty cool, but again, they're just homemade, but they're really nice. They're not line of sight blocking, but infantry can get, or tanks could get concealment hiding behind those stone walls. All right, next up we have buildings. So buildings, we've got a couple different kinds of buildings. We have these buildings, which are made by Outrider Hobbies. These are MDF buildings, multiple layer. My wife actually painted this one. You built it and painted it and assembled it yourself. They had some that were also wrecked. So you've got these types of buildings that you can build and paint. Or you can go again with Battlefront. This is a pre-painted Battlefront Gale Force 9 miniature. Same concept. They even, you know, texture the floor a little bit. So you can put your teams in there. And these are really nice. Now, these kits over here are a lot cheaper than this, but you know, you spend a couple of hours building, painting these, whereas this, you open up the box, you plop it on your table, and you're ready to go without having to, you know, invest any more time. So it's a trade-off of money or time, and then aesthetics. And forests are very important in Flames of War because one, it's a line of sight blocking terrain, and it gives infantry and artillery places to hide where tanks are going to have a hard time getting to them. So it's always good to have something like that on your table. So these templates I've been using for a long time, and they're really beat up, but I still like them. And these were, I think I bought them at Michael's. They were some Christmas decoration for Christmas Town, and they were in the discount bin, and I picked them up, and I just cut them out in different shapes to make templates for the trees. So the idea is you place that down, and that denotes the outline of your forest, and then you just put the trees on however you want. Now, the nice thing here is the template, this part is the outline of your woods. These trees are just there for aesthetics. They don't really, individual trees don't really mean anything, and as you move your tanks through here, you can reposition your trees or pull them out entirely if you need to for gameplay. Now that we've talked about the different types of terrain we're going to put on, what I'm going to do is actually build a table, and then we'll talk about the table after it's built. So what we'll do is we'll put the camera on the tripod and do an elapsed time thing so you can just see, and then we'll be right back. All right, so the board is now done. It took about 5 or 6 minutes for us to do that with my assistant Kaylee here. Hello. She helped, and we've got the board ready. So a couple things with this board. So I built this board, one, not knowing what armies are going to play on it. So it could be, when we're talking Flames of War, 2 tank armies going at each other, 2 infantry armies, tank versus infantry. You can build a board to favor a particular type of army, and if you know what you're going to be playing beforehand, you might even you know, subconsciously do that. So you always want to be aware how you're setting that up. Now, what do I mean by being more advantageous for tanks versus infantry? Well, tanks obviously are long range. They don't like lots of terrain. They like clear fields of fire, the ability to fire all the way across the board. Infantry like terrain. They like to be able to move from terrain to terrain, approaching a target without having to be out in the open very much. So the idea is to have a mix when you're talking about a fair battle. Now, you're always going to have themed battles if you're recreating a particular battle or a particular type of engagement. You might make it harder for a particular player. And another thing to keep in mind is when you build an army, when you're building your force, you might not know what type of terrain you're on. If you gamble on having a all-tank army with no infantry, and you get a very built-up city fight, your army might suffer because of that. And that's not so much the fault of the table as the fault of list building. Like, you should have anticipated that. So there's always going to be that element of list building and maps. So this board, though, is, I'm going to have a friendly game, some friends over. I don't know what they're going to bring, but I want to have a fair table. So the other thing is, when building this, I don't know what side people are going to be on. So I don't know if people are going to be fighting length to length, short side to short side, or table quarters across the battlefield. So I don't know. So again, I'm not going to build the battlefield to favor any one direction versus another. So the first thing I try to do is set up the roads. The roads kind of define the battle. And a lot of battles are fought on crossroads, so when I build these tables, a lot of times I have crossroads here. So we laid out the road first to give us the framework for the rest of our battlefield. Now you'll notice I tried to put an end on every side. So every table edge has a road, which will be helpful and fair if you're running vehicles, jeeps, armored cars. You're going to want to run them up roads, and you want to make sure that there's access or the ability to do that. You have a road, you can get one side to the other very quickly in Flames of War when you're a wheeled vehicle like a jeep. So you see I've got roads, I've got access on all four sides of the table. Then the other thing we did was we tried to create enough line of sight blocking terrain so that long range just doesn't dominate this table. So what we do is we use a combination of hedges, woods, and more hedges. So we could also have used other things. The buildings obviously are line of sight blocking as well. They're just not very wide, but you get an idea of what we're going for here. So it's going to be very hard if you're a tank, for example, that's starting on this side to see all of that board. Yeah, I have a very nice juicy field of fire down this road, but there's hedges, there's woods, there's ways that an opponent on that side of the board could get to me with the use of terrain and not be shot at from turn one. So I kind of look at that from all angles. Is any one side going to be better than another? And there always is going to be, unless you build your board perfectly symmetrical, which, let's be honest, doesn't look cool. But there's always going to be a board that might favor your type of army better than your opponent. And that comes into list building and being a player that learns their list and learns the options of their list and the best way that their list performs. So folks, there you go. That's how you create a battlefield for Flames of War. Thank you, Kaylee, for your help. And it goes to show you, even if Kaylee doesn't play Flames of War, it can still be fun to have your family help with certain parts of your hobby. Did you have fun building it?
Yes.
Was there anything fun you wanted to point out?
Yes, my favorite part probably about the board and the funnest part, probably cows in the board.
You put out cows in the board?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that adds to the kind of making it feel like it's something that's alive and real, huh?
Yeah.
So there you go, guys. Again, this is how we build tables for one of our battle reports, hanging out with friends, even with tournaments. And again, this is just the way we like to do it. Everyone's going to have their own method of doing it. And even if you start with this method, you're going to kind of spin it off into your own thing. Some people like more terrain or less terrain. Some people are going to want very expensive handmade terrain. Other people are going to want to play with coffee cans. All of that works. It's all great. But this method here is nice. It's fast, and it gives you a nice looking board that also plays well. There's nothing really ambiguous on this table as far as terrain rules go. Everything is pretty straightforward. Woods, hedges, line of sight blocking, building. The terrain rules are pretty straightforward in the current version of Flames of War. So I hope you enjoyed this battle board building tutorial. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. If you want to see more videos like this, like how do we do things, let me know, because I'd be more than happy to do it if I know that there's an audience for it, that you guys would like it. As always, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for watching, and keep on wargaming. So ultimately, building the board is how. No, you can stay. You can stay. You can stay. There you go, guys. We've built a board for Flames of War. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, please check us out on Facebook at All Miniatures Great and Small. You can see what we're up to there. Please like and subscribe here and at the channel. Click the little bell so that you can get notifications when we post additional videos. For me and Kaylee, we thank you very much and keep on wargaming. Say bye. Say bye.
Bye.
Say bye loudly.
Bye.